On this day in history, August 4th, 1265, as part of the Second Barons' War, the Battle of Evesham is fought, where the army of Prince Edward, the future King Edward I of England, defeats the forces of rebellious barons led by Simon de Montfort, 6th Earl of Leicester, killing de Montfort and many of his allies. Included in the following is an excerpt from the 1944 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, going over the history of the battle. Evesham gave its name to the famous battle fought on August 4, 1265, between the forces of Simon de Montfort, Earl of Leicester, and the Royalist army under Prince Edward. As the result of the victory at Lewes, the baronial party was supreme throughout most of England. Only on the Welsh March was the royal cause sustained, and thither de Montfort moved, taking with him the king and Prince Edward. But at Hereford, on May 28th, Edward escaped to join his adherents in the border counties. As a counterbalance, de Montfort enlisted the aid of the Welsh themselves, and took the castles of Monmouth and Usk. Meanwhile, however, Edward and the Royalists had secured all the bridges over the Severn in his rear, Gloucester being the last, and then moved down the west bank against de Montfort, now at Newport. They not only threw him back across the Usk, but frustrated his plan of transporting his army back to England by a successful sea raid with 3 galleys against the ships which he had collected at Newport. De Montfort was thus forced to undertake a roundabout and trying march north through the barren districts of Wales, while Edward, after abandoning the pursuit, fell back to Worcester to hold afresh the Severn against him. A new factor was introduced by the approach of de Montfort's son with an army of relief from eastern England. Placed between 2 opposing armies, closing upon him, if gropingly, Edward showed a real and, for a time, remarkable grasp of strategy. While de Montfort himself was still some distance from the Severn, Edward left Worcester on the evening of August 1st, marched during the night the 30 miles to Kenilworth, where de Montfort's son lay, and, taking the baronial army by surprise in the early dawn, captured and destroyed the bulk of it without resistance. Edward, without delay, countermarched to Worcester, to find that de Montfort himself had meantime ferried his army across the Severn at a point 4 miles south of the town. It was clear that, in ignorance of his son's defeat, he would be moving to join him at Kenilworth. Leaving Worcester once more on the evening of August 3rd, Edward's army moved in 3 columns by different roads, but all converging on Evesham, where they would bar de Montfort's route to Kenilworth. Although the surprise was not so complete as at Kenilworth, it was sufficient to give Edward an initial advantage over a hastily assembled enemy, whose first idea was that the approaching force was his sons from Kenilworth, a delusion fostered by Edward's ruse of displaying enemy banners. Caught in the bend of the river Avon by the converging columns and surrounded on all sides, the old earl attempted to cut his way out of the town to the northward. At first the jury of his assault forced back the superior numbers of the prince, but Simon's Welsh levies melted away and his enemies closed the last avenue of escape. The final struggle took place on Green Hill, a little to the northwest of the town, where the devoted friends of de Montfort formed a ring around the leader and died with him. The spot is marked with an obelisk.